Okay, so what if one of the most basic ideas we all have, the whole sanctity of family and the innocence of childhood thing, is just wrong? It's a pretty challenging thought, right? But let's dive into this powerful idea from Nihan Kaya's work.
Wow. This ancient quote, it gets right to the very heart of the argument we're about to explore. Because think about it. The worst kind of pain isn't just the suffering itself. It's suffering alone. It's when no one around you even sees or acknowledges what you're going through. And that, right there, is what the author calls the true hell of childhood. It's this deep, deep loneliness. Imagine feeling pain, but you don't have the words for it. You don't have the context to even understand it, let alone name it. You don't even know you have the right not to feel that way. That's the isolation we're talking about.
All right, so let's dig into this first big idea, childhood as a hidden hell. We're going to explore why, for so many people, childhood is actually the hardest part of life, mainly because all that pain is completely invisible. So the big question is why? Why is this suffering so invisible? Well, the answer is kind of simple, but also really profound. It's because a child's reality is a world of its own. It's just fundamentally different from an adult's world. See, the thing you have to get is that for a child, their world is the only world. They have zero other points of comparison. So what happens? They just normalize whatever is happening to them. Even if it's damaging, they instinctively think, well, the grown-up must be right, so I must be wrong. It's a built-in survival mechanism. And that's why their emotional pain is so intense. A sharp word to a 5-year-old can feel like an actual physical blow, while for us adults, we might just brush it off. Okay, this next part. It brings us to an idea that might be a little tough to swallow, but it's absolutely crucial for understanding this whole perspective. We're about to tackle the myth of the good parent.
Yeah, I know. There is no good family. That's a shocking thing to read, right? But here's the twist. The author argues that the best parents are actually the ones who can accept this. The ones who get that causing some kind of harm, even if you don't mean to, is pretty much inevitable in parenting.
And this chart really lays out the whole shift in thinking. It's about moving away from the myth, from the idea of the perfect sacred parent, and getting real. Instead of seeing a problem child, this perspective asks us to look at the parent's own unhealed wounds. It's about swapping out defensiveness for awareness.
So, we all agree kids need food, water, a roof over their heads, right? But this isn't just about physical stuff. It's about a deep, biological need for emotional connection. And just how vital is that connection? Well, a pretty chilling experiment from way back in 1944 gives us a stark answer.
Over 50%. That's the number of newborn babies who died in this experiment. And get this, they had perfect physical care. They were fed, clean, warm, everything they needed to physically survive. But they were never touched, never held, never spoken to. And within just 4 months, more than half of them were gone.
They died simply because their emotional needs weren't met. So let that sink in. Unconditional acceptance, love, connection, it's literally as essential as air for a child. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have for survival. And that total dependency means a child will do anything to keep that connection, even if it means ignoring or betraying their own feelings. All right, so this idea of deep survival-level dependency, it leads us right into our next big topic, respect. Or more specifically, how our culture has kind of twisted the whole meaning of it. You've heard it a million times, respect your elders. But what does that usually mean in practice? Let's be real. It often just means obey without question. And the author argues that's not respect at all. That's just demanding obedience. It sets up this power dynamic where the adult is always right and the child's own voice just gets completely shut down.
But check out this little story. It totally flips the script on respect. You have an 80-year-old man who stands up whenever a 5-year-old kid walks into the room. And when someone asks him why, he says, if the child doesn't learn respect from us, who will they learn it from? Wow. See? True respect isn't demanded. It's modeled. You teach it by giving it.
Okay, now think about this phrase. You ran, that's why you fell. Sounds pretty harmless, right? Maybe even logical. I'm sure most of us have either heard it or said it. But let's take a closer look at the damage that's hiding just beneath the surface. Because here's what the child hears. They don't hear a lesson about cause and effect. They hear your pain is your fault. It immediately teaches them to blame themselves, it completely invalidates the fact that they're physically hurting, and it turns a totally natural part of being a kid, running, falling, learning, into some kind of punishable mistake. You do that enough times and you build a person who's afraid to even try.
So, if these patterns are so damaging, but also so subtle, you've got to ask, why do they just keep going from one generation to the next? How does this cycle keep repeated?
And the answer, in a word, is projection. Parents think they're reacting to their child in the here and now, but so often what they're really reacting to are the echoes of their own childhood. It's not about the child's behavior at all. It's the parent's unhealed trauma getting projected onto them. The unresolved pain just gets passed down and finds a new home.
And this quote from a psychotherapist just nails it. The only way to break the cycle is to turn the focus inward. Real change doesn't happen when we try to fix our kid. It happens when we find the courage to look in the mirror and say, the problem starts with me.
So what does that actually look like? Well, here's a kind of roadmap for what the author calls aware parenting. It's about acknowledging your own past, owning the problem yourself instead of blaming the kid, and really truly listening to what your child is trying to say. Ultimately, it's about supporting them as their own person. And this isn't about blaming anyone. It's about taking responsibility. That's how everyone gets free. And here's a great little story to show what supporting their autonomy actually means in the real world. Let's say there's a 5-year-old, Ella, and one day she decides she's going to be a vegetarian. Now, the easy thing to do is just dismiss it, right? Call it a silly phase. But her parents don't. They actually respect her choice. They don't see a defiant kid, they see a little person developing her own values. And that's what it's all about. And that really brings us to the final and maybe most important question this whole idea leaves us with. It's a tough one. Are we actually raising our children? Or are we just trying to raise our own unhealed inner child all over again? It really forces you to think. And it suggests that maybe the best thing we can ever do for our kids is to focus on healing ourselves.